Before this video starts, if you enjoyed this video, there are many more like it already on the channel with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I am trying to hit 125,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it. I upload daily on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. So recently, DeMar DeRozan was on JJ Redick's podcast, and he said that him watching the Raptors' success in 2019 made him ask himself if it was him who was the problem. He who was holding the Raptors back. The Raptors were a team that was for many years considered a contender, but they always fell short, often to a comical degree. This was capitalized by their playoff run in 2018, where the Raptors were at the absolute best they had ever been to that point, getting a franchise record in wins, looking like a totally different team, but in the second round versus a Cavs team that could be best described as LeBron and a bunch of meh, the Raptors got swept, and it ended with a buzzer beater walk-off shot from LeBron. So for today's video, I figured I would answer that question for DeMar as to whether or not this failure of that Raptors team was on him. So we're going to look back at the Raptors before their championship run in 2019 and determine how much of this was the fault of DeMar or not. Let's start with the duo of Lowry and DeRozan making the playoffs for the first time together in 2014. These two were early into their careers, and this was the first time they really pulled it all together for a winning season. Dwayne Casey was the coach, and Masai Ujiri was the president of basketball operations. Things really were not all that different. Lowry made his first All-Star team this year, as did DeRozan. DeMar averaged 23-4-4, and Lowry averaged 18-7-5. They won 48 games, but they had the misfortune of running into the super team Brooklyn Nets, if you couldn't tell, super team is in quotes in the script. Against the Nets, they did lose in 7 games, but this was their first time in the playoffs as a team, and it wasn't bad. DeRozan averaged 24 points on 55% true shooting, and they were expected to lose this series. So I wouldn't say this was the fault of DeMar DeRozan at all. If anything, he got them further than they were expected to go. Next year is pretty much a repeat. The Raptors only won 1 more game. However, DeRozan did play 19 less games, so on the surface it was only 1 more win, but being that he played a lot less, they were definitely a better team. However, in a first round matchup that really could have gone either way versus the Wizards, the Raptors were swept, with DeRozan averaging 26-6 on 46% true shooting, which was a 5% drop off in true shooting percentage from the regular season. However, this loss could mainly be blamed on Kyle Lowry, who averaged 12 points on 39% true shooting with a 4.8 assist to 3 turnover ratio. Also, Lou Williams played like shit, but he wasn't a star player, so this loss was on Kyle Lowry. However, these first 2 seasons were not a huge deal because by no means did this team have championship expectations at this point. But from the 2015-16 season onward, both DeRozan and Lowry had their best seasons to that point. They signed Amari Carroll to be a 3-and-D wing, and Jonas Valanciunas was coming into his own. Alongside some decent bench depth, they won 56 games, which was good for the 2nd seed in the East with an 8-game lead on the 3rd seed, with just 1 less win than the Cavaliers. This team made it to the conference finals, but they really limped their way there, which was not a good sign. First round, they played the Pacers, who at this point were essentially just Paul George, and honestly, this might be the single ugliest series win for any team ever, because DeMar really earned his nickname DeMar DeFrozen in this series, because holy shit, the guy averaged 17 points on 40% true shooting, while Kyle Lowry averaged 14 points on 42% true shooting. And on the Pacers side, Playoff P, for the first time outside of a few games with the Miami Heat, actually earned that nickname that he gave himself, by the way. PG averaged 27-7-4 on 63% true shooting, which is just absurd. Too bad he wasn't able to do that in a series where his team was the favorite, but yeah. The only reason the Raptors won this series was their role players and the rest of the Pacers players outside of George as well as George Hill being garbage. I seriously doubt there is another playoff series in NBA history where the 2 star players played this horribly and they still won the series. Truly an ugly win. Next round, it was a little bit better, but not by a whole lot. They faced the Heat, who to be fair were pretty deep. However, it was essentially an old Dwayne Wade, old Joe Johnson, Goran Dragic, who was held back playing with Wade, and the 1 year where Hassan Whiteside wasn't fake good, he was good. But this series had no business going 7 games. However, this time at least it wasn't on DeRozan or Lowry. They more or less averaged around the same points as they did in the regular season on basically the same efficiency. This series was more about the defense, and the Heat absolutely killed them in this regard. However, at the end of the day, the better team won the series, despite the rest of the Raptors team really struggling outside of Lowry and DeMar. So they get to the conference finals and match up against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have who else but LeBron fucking James. As we know, this started a pattern. Now, I don't think I'll be spoiling anything by saying that the Raptors lost this series, as that was the story for this team with DeRozan year after year after year. But actually, this first matchup was the best one for Toronto. It actually didn't go that poorly. The team that ended up winning a championship this year was obviously favored in this series, but the Raptors did push it to 6 games. And DeRozan averaged 23 points on 56% true shooting, which was basically exactly what he averaged in the regular season, so this loss was not the fault of DeRozan or really anybody on the Raptors. The team that was expected to win won the series after the Raptors gave them a fight. That's not really anything to complain about. 2017 comes around and it is easily the best season of DeMar DeRozan's career, as he averages 27 points per game. He was 7th in total points scored that season and would have been 3rd if he played all 82 games. The playoffs come around and they make short work of the Milwaukee Bucks, who had yet to establish themselves as a contender at this point. But in the second round, it gets real ugly as the Raptors lose in a sweep to the Cavs, losing each game by an average of 15 points a game. In this series, DeRozan averaged just 21 points on 51% true shooting, which wasn't worse than his previous standard, but after seeming to have reached a new level after averaging 27, he dropped back to what he was. Lowry picked up his play in the series, as did their new addition of Serge Ibaka, but DeRozan underperformed so poorly that the Raptors were just eviscerated. But next year, things were different. The Raptors were under the perfect circumstances to finally make a run, as LeBron James would no longer be in their way as he was the previous 2 years. LeBron was such a problem for the Raptors to the point where DeRozan straight up said that they lost because they didn't have LeBron at one point. LeBron now had the worst supporting cast since his first stint in Cleveland, and on top of that, Toronto made some changes. They previously had a very simple offense, which often came to their detriment and was a big reason why DeRozan had struggles in the playoffs. So Dwayne Casey decided to switch things up and make it a pass-heavy offense. The Raptors this season previous were 30th in assists. This year, they were all the way up at 6th. They had the second best offense in the league, and with Serge Ibaka on the team for a full season, as well as the immediate impact rookie of OG Anunoby, they were top 5 in defense as well. So by all accounts, a contender. They had the second best record in the league, and LeBron was finally out of the way. But as we all know, that wasn't actually true. In the second round, LeBron just obliterated the Raptors in 4 games, while DeRozan averaged 17 points per game, including a 2-point loss in Game 3 where he had 8 points on 3 for 12 shooting. And then after that, Masai said enough is enough, and he traded DeRozan for Kawhi. And then of course, Kawhi led the Raptors to their first championship in franchise history, after 3 years of the Raptors being quote-unquote contenders and failing. After all of that, we finally get to the question of, was this on DeMar DeRozan? Was he the reason why the Raptors failed so much? Well, the answer is yes, and not really though. DeRozan in his prime in Toronto averaged 23.4 points on 54% true shooting, but in the playoffs in those 5 years, he averaged 21.9 points on 50% true shooting, which yes is a drop off, but nothing crazy. And in the 3 years where the Raptors were considered contenders, he averaged 24.5 on 55% true shooting, and in the playoffs, he averaged just 21.7 on 49% true shooting, which is a worse drop-off with higher expectations, and there were a handful of games where DeRozan really underperformed when he was needed. However, while this explanation probably wouldn't make DeMar DeRozan feel better, the Raptors did not get far, not because DeRozan had struggles in the playoffs, but rather because this team really wasn't going anywhere with him as the number 1 or even number 2 option. Almost every time a team wins a championship, that team has one superstar leading them, if not 2. Kawhi Leonard was a superstar, DeMar DeRozan was just not. I can't really blame DeMar for just not being as good as Kawhi Leonard. Yeah, DeMar did not always perform at his best, but the fact of the matter is DeMar's best wasn't good enough even if he did play on his best on a very consistent basis. In their first matchup versus the Cavs, DeRozan played pretty damn great, and so did Kyle Lowry and really everybody. They just weren't on that level. So on the off chance that DeMar DeRozan is watching this, which I really hope he isn't because I'd feel kind of bad just saying that he's not a superstar level talent, to put it simply, you shouldn't feel bad for not being as good as Kawhi Leonard because 99.99999% of NBA players in history were not as good as Kawhi Leonard. Now, DeMar DeRozan is an NBA player and a millionaire, and both of those two groups tend to have a little bit of an ego. Although DeRozan seems to be more self-aware than most NBA players, however, I imagine he thinks he's on that level of talent, and you kind of have to be a little bit delusional like that to reach that level of talent. A lot of players that are nowhere close to the best player in the NBA think they're the best player in the NBA, though I don't think DeMar DeRozan feels that way, but really just my point is, it wasn't his fault. It just wasn't. At the end of the day, DeMar DeRozan's only true fault was not being good as Kawhi Leonard, which, as I said, almost nobody ever is as good as Kawhi Leonard, and especially is as good as Kawhi was that year. So no, DeMar DeRozan was not the reason why the Raptors failed in the playoffs year after year after year. He might have underperformed, but even if he didn't underperform, they were not winning a championship with him as their #1 scoring option. If you want to support this content outside of just your like and subscription, I have a Patreon where you can go get some extra content. I just posted a second 2K talk over there, so if you want to check that out, go support me over there. But yeah, that's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.